Hello, hello, hello. I hope this is working well. I hope you can hear me well, and if you cannot, please tell me in the chat. But welcome to the stream. Today we will talk a little bit about AI. We haven't talked that much about AI on the channel so far. There was this one tutorial about how to use focus, but that was kind of like a very basic thing to do, like just a setup guide. But today I hope that I can give you a bit more insight into how to actually use AI to generate images, and not just to generate any images, but hopefully to generate better images, as you can see in the title. The whole idea behind that is that when I started using AI myself and using text-to-image generation, especially when you're using like AI on your local device via Stable Diffusion, I think there's like a kind of theme that the images don't really come out the way you expect them to come out, but in a negative way, not in a positively surprising way, but more like, okay, things are kind of jagged and don't really look like you imagine them to look like or how you hope they would look like. And through the project Heibara Ai, which I will show you in just a moment, I kind of got to know like a few techniques and kind of figured out workarounds how to create images that kind of just look better, to be honest, and doing so in a way and by a method that I don't really see around that much. I spend a lot of time on Reddit and just reading what people are using, what people are doing in AI, but somehow nobody really talks about the kind of technique that I will show you today. But in order to start, I will first give a shout out to the Reddit, not to the Reddit, to the Discord. So if you want to join the conversation, go over to the Discord and join the Discord via the link in the description. That's number one. And welcome to everyone who's coming from the Discord as usual. And the second thing is giving a bit of history to the whole situation, how this all came to be. So that is Heibara Ai. That is a project, basically an artist collective that I'm part of, and which kind of dedicated itself to research AI and kind of create images that kind of explore the potentials of AI in many ways. So here you can see some of the images, and they are mostly centering around or are inspired by covering people's faces, because from the beginning there was like kind of a thing we realized inside of the collective, that it's kind of difficult to create images of people with covered faces, because the models are usually biased towards showing people's faces. Like when you create portraits or something, like you will always see a person's face. But thinking about it, when such a model creates a face, they are trained on a large data set, so it is kind of like a mix of like all sorts of people's faces, which is kind of weird. So like by hiding the faces, I think it kind of plays with this aspect of like kind of trying not to use this kind of data set in a way where it's kind of strangely invading people's privacy in many ways. So that's kind of the history about that, and here we figured that there's this specific technique that I will show you today that works really well for doing this, which practically does not work in text-to-image at all, at least in our tests. So that's kind of the thing that we will do today, hopefully. And for that, we will run Stability Matrix, which is kind of a package manager for Stable Diffusion. So just to give you a bit of history, a bit of background, Stable Diffusion is kind of the base for many other things. Like you might know Midjourney, and you might know DALL-E from ChatGPT, and so on and so forth. And they are all using this kind of diffusion principle, and like Stable Diffusion, let's call it like the mother of all diffusion-based generative AI, which is not fully correct, but like let's say it for the sake of the argument. And the idea is to go from some kind of random noise to a final image, and this allows us to create practically an infinite amount of images from just random Gaussian noise. So this is the thing that kind of all other services are using as well in like adaptations, I assume. There we don't know because it's not open source, but Stable Diffusion is open source. And Stable Diffusion also provides us with the base models. But anyway, we don't really have to know all of that. The thing that we do need to know is how to run it locally. So this requires you to have like at least a decent PC. This also works on Apple devices, especially the M1, M2, M3, MacBooks, or I guess there's an iMac with an Apple Silicon chip. I'm not even sure, but there are Mac Studios, Mac Minis with M chips. Like those work pretty fine, and you can also run this locally on Windows or Linux if you are ideally having an NVIDIA graphics card or a decent CPU instead of like a decent GPU. And in order to get started with this, let's just search for Stability Matrix in our search engine of choice. And this will lead us to GitHub and to the official website of Lycos AI. We're working on this, and we will just go here. I mean, you can also build it from source, but we can just download the executable here for Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. I'm just downloading it for Windows right now, and putting it on an SSD, an external SSD, which is kind of nice, generally speaking. You can, at least on Windows, you can fully run this from an SSD. So I'm using a SanDisk Extreme Portable Pro SSD, I think, something like that, with like a 1 Mbit writing and reading speed. So there you can completely run it from your external hard drive, which is really quite nice. You cannot really run it from like a USB stick or something like that. I tried that as well, but that doesn't really work as it's supposed to. So now we got a zip file. I'm just gonna do this in the background. So I hope you all kind of know how to unzip a file. I'll just do that here. There you can see it already. Okay, so now it's unzipping to my external hard drive. And now we have Stability Matrix. I will show you this briefly. So you just get a folder with an exe file, an executable file. And if you simply double click this, it will start the installation process. So here, just for you to know, I mean, this is an open source project and you can check the source code. I mean, we didn't build it from source now, but you can check it yourself. There's always a risk running programs on the internet. I've been using this for a few months and didn't run into any issues. So I will just say run anyway, but be cautious. Don't just download things from the internet and yeah, just run them. But, you know, do it at your own caution. So now I'm using the portable mode, which means that all the data that is downloaded is put into one central folder, which is this data folder here. So that's quite nice because now you can more easily just move things around. You don't really have to install anything. It's just a portable installation. So we will find everything in here in just a moment when we press continue. So now we have this whole situation with the web UI. So welcome to Stability Matrix. Choose your preferred interface to get started. So these are the different Stable Diffusion web UIs. I mean, there's one that is called Stable Diffusion web UI, but they are all basically just user interfaces that are running in your local browser, which allow you to interact with the Stable Diffusion algorithm, basically. So different UIs have different advantages and disadvantages. I personally usually recommend the Stable Diffusion web UI as like the best kind of all-round solution, because you can install extensions, so you can kind of add functionality into it, not endlessly, but to a great degree. If you just want to get started very easily, I usually recommend Focus. So Focus is like kind of like the let's say the common denominator for all web UIs, because you can basically just jump in and just put a prompt there and it generates something. It does all of the other stuff for you, and you can still kind of change settings, but it's the easiest way to get started. But also a bit limited as in not having so many options and stuff. And then the one that I'm currently mostly working with is Comfy UI. So Comfy UI is kind of let's say the most complicated web UI, because it's this node-based system, as you can see here, which allows you to do a lot of different things and kind of affect like basically every step in like image generation and everything else. So that's kind of the thing that you can do most things with, but at the same time it's very complicated to get started with, and if you kind of want to do everything from scratch, it's like really complicated to just generate an image. You usually have to use someone else's workflow and stuff like that. So for today's tutorial, we kind of go with the middle ground and just use the Stable Diffusion Web UI by Automatic 1111. And this is kind of also the shorthand that we use, A1111 for Automatic 1111, because Stable Diffusion Web UI is basically just, yeah, everything here is a Stable Diffusion Web UI, so the name is kind of confusing. So let's just select that, and in the next step we can select a model that we want to install. So generally, a Dream Shaper is considered like a good base model with Stable Diffusion 1.5, and I know here Pony Diffusion is like very popular. I actually never used Pony Diffusion, but Pony Diffusion is supposedly one of the better SDXL models. Generally speaking, as you can see here as well, Stable Diffusion 1.5 is generally faster and requires less powerful hardware, but the quality is also worse. So to give a bit of background history here as well, Stable Diffusion 1.5 was trained on images that are 512 by 512 pixels. So generally speaking, it will create more kind of like noisy images and less high quality images. But if you have like a very slow laptop, for example, or if you have like an M1 MacBook or whatever, this might be the thing that kind of works for you because you can actually use it. And Stable Diffusion XL is trained on 1024 pixels by 1024 pixel images. So generally speaking, the quality is higher, but it also takes longer to render and requires more powerful hardware. In my case, I really started to dislike Stable Diffusion 1.5 models because they kind of are like so close to being good, but just short of it. So I would kind of advise you to go with Stable Diffusion XL models. But again, like instead of not being able to use anything, just use the Stable Diffusion 1.5 model and kind of fine-tune it later on. But right now I will not use any because it will take too long to download, and we will soon jump into like my personal main installation, let's call it that. So I just press download but not select any, so I'm not really downloading any. So now in the background everything is being installed. And again, I already did that in a different installation, but we can just look at it while I have a sip of water, and then I will just kind of show you around Stability Matrix and like where to do what. And again, if you have any questions, please let me know in the chat. Yes, the QR code was covered by my face, but that was just advertisement for Instagram, so I don't really worry about that. So now we can press hide because this is just running in the background. Here we can also see, check how our downloads are going. So this is just running in the background. And here we can now check what kind of stuff we have in Stability Matrix. So for one, here are the packages. Here we will see all the web UIs that we can install later, or that are being installed in the background. So here will be the Stable Diffusion web UI, but you can also add new packages in here. That's kind of the nice thing of using Stability Matrix, because in the beginning I also installed all the Stable Diffusion web UIs manually, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the issue is that you kind of have to set up everything. If you want to share models between different web UIs, you kind of have to set up everything manually, and that's kind of annoying. So in this case, it's pretty nice. Like if I want to use Automatic 1111 and ComfUI, I can just install ComfUI in addition to that, and then I have both packages, and they are all using all the models that I've installed. So that's quite nice. We have the inference tab here, I guess, menu. And I don't really use that. You kind of like, you have to install a ComfUI to use this, I believe. And here you can just do like a quick image generation with like the most basic settings. So I don't really mess around with that, but yeah, you can do that. Then we have the checkpoint manager. Here you will later see all the models that you have installed. We didn't choose any, so there's nothing here yet, but later you will be able to see them here. And again, all your packages can use all the different models that you have downloaded. And here you can also see like there's different types of models. ControlNet, ADetailer, and Stable Diffusion, for example, is like the base model, like the main model, the checkpoint that we will use for most of our generations. Yes, and if you haven't chosen any model in the installation process to download, you can start to do that here. So here we will basically just load Civet AI. Civet AI is kind of a yeah, probably one of the most popular, if not the single most popular platform for AI things online, I would say. So people are publishing their models there, and from here you can download them. As I mentioned before, Dreamshaper is like one of the most popular SD 1.5 models. So here you can just press import and download them into your stability matrix installation. And here we can check what type of model this is. So checkpoint is like the Stable Diffusion model, like the most basic thing that we need to have in order to generate any image. And next to it we can also see what type of checkpoint it is. So this is a Stable Diffusion 1.5 model. This is a 1.5 Hyper model. Hyper usually stands for models that are trimmed to be extremely fast. So here you can generate images in just a few steps instead of many steps. So that's something to keep in mind. Usually their quality is slightly worse, but therefore they are much faster. There are no SDXL models. Here's the first SDXL model, but it's an XL Hyper model. Here's an X.1.5 model, XL 1.5 model exactly. So this one is a fast one. Juggernaut XL is also one of the more popular ones. And here we have XL 1.5. Anything XL, I think that's also very popular. Here you can see it's hearted 20,000 times and downloaded 300,000 times. So yeah, there you can see that. So just choose stuff that you want to have here as models. You can also try around and try different models and see which one works best for your particular use case. Everything that I'm talking about now, I should also show you that, is basically also covered in this tutorial. Again, this tutorial is also linked in the live stream video description, so please check that out in case you haven't yet. So here's the entire process that I've already shown you, and here you get also all the other links and get a hopefully decent tutorial about how to install everything. So here again, popular models, I go through a few of them. So Dreamshaper 8 is one, and Cyberrealistic is another one for Stable Diffusion 1.5, and Stable Diffusion XL usually is like Juggernaut, and I personally always use Chroma XL, but we will get to that in just a moment. Here you will also see, if you follow along live now and you get this kind of error, it means that the model you try to download is only accessible for Civet AI users. This doesn't mean that you have to buy something, but just means that you need to have an account at Civet AI. So here I quickly walk you through how to create an account and how to create an API key so that you can actually connect Civet AI with a stability matrix, so then you can download everything. So just to keep that in mind, you can do everything I'm showing you here basically based on this tutorial. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's get back to it. So the output browser usually shows us all the different outputs we generated. This is also shared ideally, or in most cases, between packages. You can change that in the settings later, but if you use ComfyUI and Automatic 1111, you can use all the or you can see all the outputs from all packages in here. Lastly, we have workflows. This is really only important, let's say, if you are using ComfyUI, because these are usually ComfyUI workflows. So if we have one here, for example, we can load the workflow and then just do the exact same steps as another user did. But anyway, we're not doing that today. That's something for a different tutorial. If you're interested in that, just let me know and we can talk about it when it's time. So now everything is downloaded, we can see successfully installed, so we can clear this, and now we have our packages installed. I will quickly show you and walk you through these icons. So the left one allows us to check for updates. So here we can see if there's a new version of Stable Diffusion, of the Stable Diffusion Web UI. We are now in version 1.9.4. Then we have launch options. We don't really have to do anything here usually, and that's one of the great things about Stability Matrix. It recognizes your hardware, your GPU, and kind of adapts the settings according to your device. So you don't really have to like fiddle around with what kind of settings should work best for you, because Stability Matrix kind of decides what should work best for you. And lastly, we have extensions. That's another thing that's pretty nice. So I use a few extensions always. So one, and this is the one I will show you now, is the Lobe theme. Generally speaking, all these web UIs are usually based on a system called Gradio. I think that's the name, Gradio. So they use a particular kind of UI, a user interface, basically a specific type of styling, which I personally don't like, and I think it's not very easy to read. Usually, like, the legibility of the interface is not great. So I usually like to install this theme because I think it just looks better. There's a few other extensions I usually recommend people to use. We see them here. Oh, here's like a line break that shouldn't be there, but anyway, ADetailer is used to kind of fix faces and hands after the fact, which is pretty nice. You might have seen that before that AI usually gets those wrong. So usually there are issues with like hands with more or less fingers than 5, or like faces that kind of look messed up. Then we have the infinite image browsing, which just allows you to see your images that you created inside of your web UI, which is kind of nice. You also have the Stable Diffusion web UI Civet helper, which gives you extra images and stuff like that. I think you don't really need that, either with Stability Matrix or with the Lobe theme. I think they do that by default already, so this might kind of be redundant, but here's the Lobe theme. ControlNet allows us to control specific things about the image, which I also always like to use, or in many cases like to use. The clip interrogator I'm not really recommending these days because I'm not really happy with the results, but it allows you to put an image into the web UI and give you kind of the estimated prompt it would give for that image, or basically an image description, which can be nice. And the Open Pose editor, again, is something I don't really recommend these days because I'm not using it myself, but it allows you to kind of create a skeleton and use that as like the reference image. But again, you don't really need that. But most importantly, I would tell you to use Lobe theme, the ADetailer, and the ControlNet. I think those are like the most central ones, and the infinite image browsing actually too. So with that, we kind of are set up. Let's assume like when you want to install all those, I'm just gonna do that here now, ADetailer. I'm just choosing this one as well. Then we choose the ControlNet. There's a few ControlNets. Oops, ControlNet, where do I have the typo? Here I like to use the one by Mecubil. I don't know, maybe that's the name. And we had the ADetailer, we had the Lobe theme, we have the ControlNet, and the infinite image browsing. I'm just going to add them and install them just for illustrational purposes. Here again, it can happen that some of these do have some kind of virus in them. It's not out of the world. There was recently a case with the ComfUI custom node where the owner just put in some malicious code. So again, be cautious. There are kind of like things that people just trust, as with these add-ons, extensions. So I haven't had any issues with those, but kind of be cautious. Don't just install random things from the internet. But you know, that's something to keep in mind always. So now we have the installed extensions here. and we could update them or uninstall them here again, but now we have them. And now we could press or click on launch, and then we start the web UI. I'm not going to do that now because it will start downloading things in the background. So I will basically just take a very, very brief break, like really only for a few seconds, while I open my main installation, so we can jump right into the generation in just a few seconds. So I'll see you on the other side. So here we are again, and I forgot to turn off the kind of banner in the background. But anyway, now you should subscribe. Thank you for subscribing if you do. So now we have my main installation, and as you can see, I mostly use Stable Diffusion Web UI and Comfy UI. So let's get started by just clicking on Launch, and this will open a terminal inside of Stability Matrix. So usually if you install Stable Diffusion or the Stable Diffusion Web UI manually, you will have to have the command prompt open in the background, and then you have like your command prompt and everything is running in there. So it's kind of nice to have it centralized in here usually. Right now it's taking quite a long time. I don't know why it's so slow, but maybe it's because I'm streaming. But anyway, let's just wait and see, or wait for this to start, and we can see stuff is going on. And here you can also see my settings. I'm using Xformers and stuff like that, but you don't really have to worry about that. We just keep this running and wait for it to finish. So there will be a few more things that we will talk about. Generally, we are going to use a technique now that does some image-to-image generation. So we will later find some reference images. Now we can already see everything is starting correctly. We will use reference images to create new images based on them. But we are in automatic 1111, so we can get started already, and I will just walk you through the user interface a little bit. Maybe we can make this a bit larger, so if you are watching on a mobile device, I hope you can see this better now. But when you start this, this is how the Lobe theme looks like from the beginning. And we can see a few interesting things here. So let's go from left to right and from top to bottom. So first we see Lobe theme, Stable Diffusion, that's just that. And up here we see all the different kind of menus and areas that we can join, or that we can open rather. So we have text image, image to image, extras, and a lot of stuff that we don't need. We have the interrogator and infinite image browsing, settings, and extensions. So these are the main ones. Up here we can switch between light and dark mode, but let's just stay with the dark mode for the moment. So now going one level lower, we have the quick settings, where we can change the Stable Diffusion checkpoint. So this is our main model that we are using. So here you can see already I have a lot of models installed, or maybe not a lot, but quite a few models installed. Now I have, I selected before Anima Pencil XL, which is an anime based or illustration based model. So this one is particularly good for creating anime style stuff. We can do that later and we can have a look at that. Let me know in the chat if that is relevant to you. But the model that I always use lately is Zavichrome XL version 6. So I will just click on that, and you will also find, or you can already find the link to that model in the description below. So just make sure to check that out if you're interested in that. So this will load now, it's processing in the background, and here we can also see what's happening. This one I will just put on the side. Just to catch up with this quickly, you know that your Stable Diffusion web UI has loaded correctly when this line is coming up. So it's running on local URL, and then you get the URL here. That's basically just a localhost. Don't have to worry about that. You can then open it here, or it might open automatically, or you just copy this link and paste it into your browser, and you should be able to run it. If you are done with your generation and don't want to use it anymore, you can just click on stop, or if you figure that stuff is kind of jagged, if things are not loading fast enough, you can press on restart. There's a few more things here. There will be a lot of errors. I get tons of errors, but usually they don't impact stuff drastically. I mean, of course, if something really doesn't work, check your errors, but usually this is related to some kind of extension that I'm not really using at the moment, so I don't really bother about that. I'll put it on my second screen just for simplicity's sake, because we don't really have to check it anymore. So I'll just put it there, and now we should be able to use things here. So we already checked the checkpoint, so this is how I load the checkpoint. I just click here and then I click there. The prompt editor, we don't really need that. Here's like a kind of pre-made stuff that we can use, but I'm really never using that. And since you really only use this usually to load your checkpoint, I press this arrow to the side, and then it's out of sight and out of mind for me usually, because I'm not switching between models that much. And someone wants to see the difference between Juggernaut and Zavi. That's something we probably won't check today. Maybe we can check it. Maybe we can check it later, but since Juggernaut is a hypermodel, it's supposed to be very different. It works on different kind of settings, so it's not really comparable. But anyway, out of sight, out of mind. As I said, the models are gone now. We can get them back in by pressing this again, but I like to have it as like just gone, because I don't think about it. Then we have the positive prompt and the negative prompt. Here we have some settings that I will walk you through. Here we can generate, and here we have like some extra stuff. So here as well, we can go to the checkpoints and kind of load the checkpoints from here if we don't want to use the area on the left side. And we can also load LoRa's. LoRa's are low rank adaptation models, so they are usually used to kind of add functionality to a checkpoint model. So checkpoint models are the big models, so to say. They basically know everything, but if you have something in particular, for example, like this LoRa here adds some kind of like old school animation illustration style. If your model is not capable of doing that by default, you can add this LoRa to kind of add this kind of style to it. But here as well, usually I don't use them, so I just press the arrow and get rid of it, and then I'm kind of fine. So now we have everything kind of condensed to the most basic settings. So I will just start with something very, very simple, just to show you how frustrating it can be to just generate without really knowing what to do. So let's just do like a very simple prompt. So I will try to do something kind of in the style of Heibara Ai, but kind of purposefully bad. So let's just say I want to have a portrait of a person wearing a linen headscarf covering their face. And maybe let's give it a bit more information. Maybe let's call it futuristic style. I don't really know if that's futuristic. Maybe heavy folds, kind of like that. And maybe also let's already say white linen, and perhaps photography as like a style. So this is already relatively detailed, but let's just generate that and let's see kind of how things go. Hopefully everything is running fast, and it does run fast, and that's not great, not bad, kind of an in-between space. I'm kind of relatively positively surprised. I thought it's going to be even worse. But one thing we can see is like there's a lot of skin, so usually I like to already start with the negative prompt NSFW, because that stands for not safe for work, so this will kind of filter out all kind of gore or kind of problematic content. And nude, sometimes steps as well, so not to make it kind of, yeah, show a lot of skin. So we can already kind of try with that. I mean, the generations are fast, so we can go through a few generations. So now there's like less skin, I guess, but the background is kind of random, as we've seen before. Like one image has like this kind of background, the other image has like that kind of background. It's kind of strange, and I think I might have holes. I mistyped that, so maybe let's try with the heavy folds instead of heavy holes. And that does maybe change it a little bit, I don't know. So anyway, so if you just do that, I assume you will relatively, like you will get kind of frustrated relatively fast, because I personally do get frustrated by this relatively fast. So let's kind of start to improve the settings step by step. So for one, I will use the opportunity to go back into the stability matrix installation and go back to the model browser. So one thing that you could that you should know is that you can keep this running in the background while you are checking other stuff. So now I go to the model browser and I search for the model that we are using now. So I'm using Zavichroma XL. So I'm just searching for Zavichroma XL. Just generally, sometimes this is very slow. Yeah, and sometimes the servers are down and sometimes things are strange, but anyway, hopefully it works for you. Yeah, it did work relatively fast. Now the search here is also not very great, but anyway. So one thing I can see is like there's an updater variable, which is kind of helpful to know, but I stayed with version 6 for a while. So that's that anyway. So we can go into the model description here and get some interesting and helpful information about the model. So here we can read, consider using DPM double plus 3MSD exponential for this model, which is basically the creator of the model telling us what kind of settings they have the best results with, which should be something that we consider because they are usually the people who know their model best. So here I already know, okay, this is kind of the settings that I should be aiming for. So let's go back and let's kind of check where we get that. So here we can already see DPM double plus 2M, and they wanted us to use 3M. So let's just click on this, and here we see 3MSDE. So this is basically a different sampling method. You don't really have to know what a sampling method is at this point, just check and you can see, okay, this is the one that the user is suggesting who created this model. And next we had the person say exponential, and that is the schedule type. So instead of having automatic here, we can go to exponential. And then let's just do another creation with this, and I assume this will not be much greater. Actually, it's much worse because we don't have a lot of steps, but I will explain that in a second. So this is not really great. So anyway, that was not good for illustrational purposes, but we will get there eventually. So the next most interesting thing is the sample steps. So generally speaking, Stable Diffusion works in this method where we go from this random Gaussian noise, as I explained earlier, and step by step go to the final image. So the steps declare how many steps we are going, like how often do we take noise away from the image in order to get to our output image. So generally speaking, the more steps we take, the better the image quality is. This is not fully correct. There is something like a plateau, and there might even be something like a bell curve where after like let's say like 1,000 steps, the image gets much worse actually and not better, because we're trying to subtract the noise from an image where there is no noise in it anyway. So that's kind of like an issue. So I personally, for this specific model and for this specific method, I like to use let's say 60 steps. I also sometimes go up to 80 steps or 100 steps, but keep in mind we are now doing a lot of extra steps, so it is much slower, like it takes much longer. It's not slower, but we take more steps, so the entire process is longer. So if you have bad hardware, if you have a bad GPU or whatever, you might not want to crank this up to like 60, 70, 80, but maybe keep it down to like 30 or something. 20 is definitely too low here, but yeah, maybe 80 is too much for your hardware. So I like to use 60, so let's just do that for the moment and see how this goes. And compared to the one before, you can already see this looks much better, I think. This looks almost decent, but still kind of grainy. And the graininess basically comes from the resolution at this point, I would say, because I think 60 steps should be enough, but we only generate images of 512 by 512 pixels. So, as I told you before, Stable Diffusion 1.5 models are trained on 512 by 512 pixels, but Stable Diffusion XL models are trained on 1024 by 1024 pixels. So since we are using an SDXL model, as we can see from the Savichroma XL, we might as well go to 1024 by 1024 pixels for the resolution, and this should already kind of render a much nicer and better image. And now you can also see it takes much longer already. I mean, like, this is still relatively fast, but yeah, still it takes longer, you know, which kind of makes sense because it's twice the resolution. So now we should be able to see a much nicer image already, I would say. But let's see for the example or the output, and I will have a sip of water in between. Yes, so here you can already see the wrinkles and like the kind of line and fabric come out much nicer already, I think. So that's pretty nice, I would say. Let's wait for it to decode, because it basically went through all the steps, but now it kind of has to put all the pixels together basically. So let's just wait this extra second. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. But as you can see, like, we can slowly get better already here. Like, okay, the steps are incremental, you know, like we're taking very small steps, but I think like kind of understanding your settings, understanding your model kind of gets you much closer to the kind of result that you want to get to already. So this is really taking quite some time, so I'm going to start to explain the next value already. So for one, we can check the batch count. Generally, if you hover over a setting here, it will give you like useful information about it. So here, if we hover over the batch count, it says how many batches of images to create, and it also says has no impact on generation performance or VRAM usage. So that's pretty nice. So if you want to create like 4 images in one run, like basically queue 4 images, you can basically just go here and say 4, and then you should be able to generate 4 images one after the other. So that can be helpful, but for the illustration purposes right now, I don't think we should do that. And this is really getting strange, so I might have to restart the web UI. But let's go through the CFG scale first, maybe. So CFG scale, the CFG scale stands for Classifier Free Guidance Scale. And again, you don't really have to understand what this means, but simplifiedly speaking, this determines or tells the algorithm how much to consider your text prompt and how much to just generate freely. So the higher this value is, the more it will stick to your prompt. So if I see that there's like a pattern where it kind of just ignores parts of my prompt, I will just go in here and kind of increase this value. So maybe I go to something like 10 or 12. And at some point after that, like let's say 15 or so, like it kind of starts to get like very weird and it creates strange colors. So that doesn't really work. But let's say like up to values of like 10 and 12, it should be fine. The default value is 7, which usually works fine for most things. And on the other hand, if I can see that it kind of like tries to really follow something inside of my prompt that I don't really care so much about, and I'd rather have like something more creative, something more, let's say, interpretative of my input prompt, I can lower the value to something like 5 or 4. Again, if you go like down to like 1 or 0 or whatever, I guess at some point it just creates like something random. So I usually like to use values of like 4 and 5 for like more brainstorming kind of situations where I'm kind of more open to what kind of output I get, and 7 is kind of like my, okay, I wanted to follow my prompt, and like 10 or 12 is something that I do if I'm like kind of disappointed that it doesn't really follow specific parts of my prompts. In addition to that, if we want to kind of highlight one specific part of our prompt, we can use these braces. So if I wanted to really focus on the white aspect, I mean, now it really creates already something white, so that wouldn't be my #1 priority. But if I want to focus on something white, I can put these braces around it. And other than in like a natural language or in our grammar, this doesn't mean that it's like kind of secondary to the main sentence. But here it means that we are specifically focusing on that word, so it will put more weight on that specific term. We can also put the braces around like white linen. If we kind of see, okay, if we put the braces around white, it does something white, but it doesn't really connect the aspect of white to the aspect of linen, so maybe we want to connect those by putting the braces around them like that. We can do this up to 3 braces. 3 braces will already create like a very high focus on that, like a very high weight on that term. But usually, like kind of when I figure, okay, there's like one specific thing in the prompt that doesn't really come through in the final image, I like to start putting braces around that. The other way around is like if there's something that is kind of too much in focus, I can put these squared braces around it. So the squared braces are basically, is it squared braces? I think so. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But if you put those around it, it lowers the weight. So if I put those around, like maybe the headscarf is coming through too much, this way I can lower a specific term inside of the prompt. So these are some of the ways that we can use the prompt and the CFG scale to kind of tweak what kind of image we create. So that's that. And since this is like, okay, this is really random, and this sometimes happens where just things just don't work, you know. Oh, I accidentally clicked on something that I shouldn't have clicked on. But this just sometimes happens. This is like all open source software that is just developed by people in their free time for the most part. So, you know, sometimes things just don't go as you want them to. So in this case, just to show you again, I would just go in here into stability matrix and just press restart because, okay, something is going wrong. So now I get this connection error, but in the background it's restarting. In the meantime, we can look at something else already. So that is the idea of creating prompts with AI. So I think you all already know ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is kind of like, I guess, in popular terms, the mother of all popular AI stuff that we kind of hear about in our daily lives. So ChatGPT is basically a large language model, or rather a web UI, or a user interface for a large language model. So instead of creating images like we do with Stable Diffusion, we can create text. Now those are trained on some kind of data set, usually just scraping the internet and getting all sorts of information from the internet. But of course we can also train it on a specific data set, on something more narrow than like just like, let's say, the internet at large, or like Wikipedia or something like that. So, for example, what people did is kind of trying to find good prompts for Stable Diffusion and training large language models based on that. So one person in this case really who did that is this person. I will explain this in a bit, just give me a moment to have a sip of water. So this is the Ollama website. Ollama is a software that allows you to run large language models inside of your command prompt on your PC. This works, I think, also for Windows, macOS, and Linux. And here people can share their models in order to share their models that they have trained for specific purposes, for example. So here we have impact frames, a user who created this Stable Diffusion prompt maker, which is based on Ollama 3, which is this large language model created by Meta, I believe. I think that's correct. It's a large language model by Meta, and this person basically just fine-tuned it to be able to create better Stable Diffusion prompts. So this is trained on over 50,000 synthetically created prompts, I assume, high-quality Stable Diffusion prompts. And here we can kind of see how this works. So if we want to use that, we just go here to download. I'm opening this in a new tab, just to make sure. And yeah, here we can see it works for macOS, Linux, and Windows. So we just download it and basically double press it, and this installs Ollama. And once we have Ollama installed, we can copy this text basically. And I will just do that now. I just open the command line, and now I can put in this prompt, and if we have Ollama installed, it will either start Ollama and start to run this large language model, or it will download it if you're doing this for the first time. So I created a bat file for myself, so I can just basically start this from a file, but here you can also see, already see, it just gives you like a random prompt. So in this situation, I kind of want to get this better prompt because, like, let's say we want to do something in the vein of Heibara Ai, of the images that we've seen here. So what I can do now is basically talk with this large language model in the same way I would talk with ChatGPT. And instead of giving us, I don't know, like some advice on whatever, it will give us a prompt. So here, let's kind of think about like what kind of characteristics this has. So I will start like this. Okay, create a prompt for a photograph of a person fully veiled in white linen, their face covered with a pure white studio background, even lighting, low contrast, and low saturation. I think that's a good starting point. Let's just try that, and now I press enter, and now I get a prompt from that. So if I would have just used this, like a person fully veiled in white linen and so on and so forth, it would probably not come out ideally, because I'm not really triggering the kind of words that Stable Diffusion is trained on in order to create images. So here we get this enigmatic figure shrouded in mystery, completely veiled behind an opaque veil of pristine white linen, face hidden from view, posed against a spotless neutral studio backdrop, soft diffused light emanating from above, gentle highlights accentuating the folds of fabric, muted tones, subdued colors, ethereal ambience. So this already sounds pretty great for me. This already is like kind of way more precise than what I was using before. So if I paste it in here, two things, like for one, you will see it also copies the line breaks. So one way we can quickly fix this is by just pressing this format prompts thing. So now it will put everything in one line, and let's just run it. So one thing we will probably see now, let's see if it really does that, but I assume so. It will most likely be very slow, because the thing we just started, Ollama, is also an AI that is running locally on our machine. So here we can already see it's supposed to take like 15 minutes, which is not what we want. I think it will go lower pretty soon, but we're basically running like two AI models at the same time, which is not great for performance. I will just keep it running like this for the moment, I believe. Let's see how long it takes. Because now what I want to show you is that we can start chatting with the AI, with the large language model here, just as we would with ChatGPT, for example. So here I can already see I'm not very happy that it doesn't really completely veil the person's face, like you can actually see the face, which is not really what I wanted. So now I could go back here and be like, okay, this already looks good, but the person's face is not fully veiled. Please focus more on that. And I will kind of keep it rendering in the background. Yeah, let's just ignore what is going on here. Like we can kind of see where this is going already. By the way, here you can also see like the steps that it takes, right? So in the beginning, it's like very noisy and very grainy, and with time progressing, we go through more denoising steps. So this is what we can see live here. So I jump back to Ollama again. Like this is like 2 AI models running at the same time on my PC, which is not great. Maybe I will just wait this out. But you can see like this is kind of like a cool way to interact with AI on like multiple levels. Like for one, we have the image generation, obviously, but for 2, we also have the prompt generation with an AI and this kind of like dialogue we go into. Like we kind of take the output we get from here and kind of start to talk with the AI based on that and kind of see how to get to a better image step by step. Here, for example, I think already to just mention that from the get-go, I think this looks already much better, generally speaking. Like it doesn't really follow what I had in mind because, again, the face is not fully covered. But I think quality-wise, this is already much better than what we had with just like our own jagged kind of prompt that we used at first, where we kind of like just improvise and be like, okay, these are the kind of things I want to have in there. So I think personally already like using this kind of AI generated prompt already makes it quite a bit better in my point of view. So now we went through all the steps again, but we won't get the final image. Kind of getting stuck here, which is not great. Let's wait again for like a few seconds. Oh no, that worked. Okay, that's great. So I think here the quality is pretty good already. I think we already went like much further than we had initially. Again, by kind of triggering the kind of words, the trigger words that the model presumably wants to have. So let's go back to Ollama and like kind of tell it to do that now. So here it starts to talk with us. I apologize for the mistake. Here's a revised prompt. So now we have animated figure shrouded in mystery, face completely covered. Did we have that before? No, we had that. Oh, before we conceal, now it's covered by a seamless, pristine white linen veil, smooth, unbroken folds wrapping around chin and jawline. Interesting, so it kind of focuses on that, which is good. Creating an impenetrable mask of wittiness, of whiteness, not wittiness, set against the clean, neutral studio backdrop, even lighting, low contrast, low saturation. Airless stillness, not sure where the airlessness comes from, but well, it sounds kind of good. So let's just put it in here and see where this goes. In this case, let's kind of, I kind of want to show you how to get rid of Ollama in case you kind of like, it gets really slow because you have Ollama in the background running. So in this case, I press Control and D. I kind of figured on macOS it didn't work like that, but here works like that. So this kind of quits it. Then we can close it. And if it still keeps the model loaded in the background, I think it keeps the model loaded for 5 minutes basically. You can go in your applications here, and I'll just put it in here so we can access it more easily, and just do a right click on the little llama icon and press quit Ollama. So now if I do that again, it should be much faster. Yeah, now you can see it only takes a few seconds rather than like multiple minutes when we have Ollama open as well. So now it kind of tries to force this thing around. This looks bad. So one thing I would say here is like, okay, probably the CFG scale is high, perhaps too high. This doesn't look like I want it to look like. So I'll lower the CFG scale. it's kind of strange because, as I said before, as I explained earlier, the higher the CFG scale is, the more closely it should be to the prompt. And here it kind of feels like it's not really following the prompt very closely. So I'm not really sure how that happens. But definitely now going through the settings, like these kind of settings all are already kind of where I want them to be anyway. And the only thing that kind of was, let's say, slightly off was the CFG scale, because 12 or 10 as the CFG scale is quite high already. Now we're having this issue again where it doesn't want to finish the generation. I don't know, I haven't had this like this kind of bad in the past, so I kind of can't tell you what to do when this is happening, but I mean, if all else fails, just restart it. I'll wait for a few more seconds, but then I will just restart it again. Yeah, this is taking too long. I don't like that, so I just restart the web UI. Perhaps it's related to the fact that I'm streaming in the background. Who knows? But yeah, we get the error again, and we can wait just a moment until it starts again. And then we can kind of re-render it with the lower CFG scale. Let's see how that goes. So it should start again now. I'm just closing the automatically open thing because I want to keep my old settings. So I'll just go here and then press generate again, and let's see if this goes any better than before. So now I load the CFG scale. Okay, it still doesn't really want to cover the face, which is bad, and but also kind of what I wanted to show you. So one question in the chat, how loud is your PC? Okay, stuff quickly, like shortly gets chopped, which I understand might be the case, and people are asking how loud my PC is, and it's pretty quiet because I put my fans to a low fan curve, but that's not so important right now. But generally speaking, this is not really where I want to be. So covering the face is really quite difficult. So for one, I figured like the headscarf situation kind of works well. I figured that at some point. So if I kind of put in here like white pristine linen headscarf instead of veil, this might already work much better. But generally speaking, it's very difficult to cover the faces of people in these AI generations. So we kind of keep having this issue of it not finishing well, which is unfortunate, but let's just ignore that. But anyway, the thing that I figured is that these text-to-image things, text-to-image generations, are really limited by what the model knows, and they are really limited by the fact that we always start with a completely random noise. So jumping back to the theory just for a moment, as I've said before, Stable Diffusion works in this way, where we go from this random Gaussian noise step by step to a final image. So just talking about the theory here, in theory, all the possible images are embedded in this random noise. So in theory, anything could come from this random noise. The random noise, by the way, we didn't talk about the seed yet. The seed determines which kind of noise is being created. So if we have all the same settings with all the exact same seed, let's say 1, 2, 3, it will always create the exact same image. Usually we don't want that, we want to have variety, so we can go back to random, which sets it to -1, so this will create a completely random noise each time we create an image. So I figured, okay, maybe it's not really ideal to start with this grain that can embody and embed or has all the potential images that we can generate embedded with them. But it might be better to start with a specific kind of grain instead of like any random grain or any random noise. So this is where image to image comes in. usually image to image is used to use some kind of reference image that we want to create kind of closely or recreate closely by saying, okay, kind of transform this image or add to this image just a little bit of grain and then denoise it again through Stable Diffusion to create some kind of variation of the input image. What you can do though is to say, instead of like using, let's say, 70-80% of your input image, you can only use like 10 or 20% of your input image. So basically it means you are putting you're starting with 20% of your input image in terms of noise and 80% of random noise. So you still embed a lot of potential into the image. You can still create like, let's say 80% creativity, while you keep 20% based on your input image. And this is kind of where things start to look very different. So here again, I'm kind of getting frustrated that this is not working as it's supposed to, but you know, I mean, at least we get like a kind of the image, and you know, it would look slightly better if this would actually work. But anyway, let's just act as though this would be the final image. I restart in the background again, and in the meantime we can kind of go back to the idea, okay, where do we get our input images from if we do image to image generation? So here's the image to image tab. It basically looks the same as the text to image tab, with the only difference being that we can put an image in here. So I want to show you two different sources for your input images, because this kind of raises the issue of intellectual property. So if you just go on the internet and just select someone's input image and just denoise it very slightly and create a new AI generated image very closely to that reference image, at what point is it random enough not to violate intellectual property? And at what point is it just taking that image and just stealing it practically? So in order to avoid this, although this is like an issue that we have generally with AI because the models are trained on a large data set of random images from the internet, so there is copyrighted material inside of the model or based on which the model is trained. So this is kind of a conflict that we always have to consider. But at least to avoid this second conflict where we're just like stealing other people's intellectual property, it makes sense to use input images or reference images that are free to use and that we can adapt and change to our liking, and ideally also without having to give credit each time, because sometimes we generate images and we cannot really figure out after the fact which input image we use. So kind of like, okay, give credit where it's due, obviously, but sometimes it might just be impractical to figure out after the fact which input image we use. So there are two sources I like to suggest, and these links are also in the description again, so check that out as well. So one is the Museo app, which I personally love. I think it's a project. It's an open source project. We can also check it out on GitHub, and it's the kind of thing that I love the internet for. It's just these two people who worked on this primarily, who indexed basically all kind of public domain images from the Art Institute of Chicago, the Rijksmuseum, the Harvard Art Museum, the New York Public Library Digital Collection, and kind of indexes all the images that are free to use and create a search engine from it. So there are two ways we can approach this here. For one, we can kind of try to get like a very random image, or we can get kind of like a very specific image that we want to have. So one thing we can do is just to put in portrait as like a search term. So in this case, we kind of create some kind of portrait. So this we could use in order to guide our image in a very close way. So for example, I might use this Van Gogh painting and kind of create something that looks very similar to it. So that is one way to approach it. Or if you want to create a landscape, you can just go in here and say landscape, and then you have landscape images, which might be what you're looking for. So here you can again guide your image generation by the input image you choose. What you can also do is, and we can already see some here, these sketches, we can use something that really doesn't look like what we want to get out. So I like to use the term sketch and search for sketch, for example, which often gives us like these very abstract sketches, where it's really more the quality of the paper that we get from it. So we don't really get any kind of composition from it, or any kind of, I don't know, other kind of content from it, I guess, but really only, let's say, the kind of quality of the paper, for example. So I open this in a new tab. So now we can see we are here on the Harvard Museum website, I believe, yes. So this is the illustration of a deity from Temokayama Shrine, I guess. Please pardon my Japanese pronunciation. But here we can check everything and kind of check the license and stuff. So this allows us to use it for specific purposes, and now I just use it here for educational purposes anyway, so that should be fine. And here I can go and basically go to download, right click, save this image, and I will just save it here on the side in my downloads and just put it there. Now we get it down here. So if we jump back into image-to-image generation, I will just use the same kind of settings we had before, the same prompt, just to be able to compare this well. And here we had NSFW and nude, and here we can now input the image that we just downloaded. So here I'm kind of really trying to get this whitish kind of essence of the paper from it. So again, the settings from before was DPM double plus 3M SDE and exponential, and we use 60 steps, so this will be the same. We created an image of 1024 by 1024 pixels. Here we should also check, we can crop and resize, so this will just crop and resize it because our input image is much higher in resolution than the image we want to create. And here we have the same kind of settings, CFG scale at 7, and here we get this new setting now. So the denoising strength, I will just read it out loud here, determines how little respect, really it says that, I never read that, so this is the first time we're reading this as well, this is interesting phrasing, determines how little respect the algorithm should have for images content. At 0, nothing will change, and at 1, you will get an unrelated image. With values below 1.0, processing will take less steps than the sampling steps slider specifies. Okay, that's quite interesting. So anyway, this basically says, and I don't think it works fully like that, but simplifiedly speaking, in this case, first, the higher the value is, the more creative the output is. If we put this to 0, as it said, nothing will change, and if we put it to 1, everything will change. So by putting it to 0.75, we basically take 75% random noise and 25% based on our input image. So here you can already figure, like, okay, if it takes like 25% from this, it will really mostly just take the essence of this white grain, but it still has like 75% of like randomness that it can generate, so we'll probably still get to something close to like a portrait based on this, although the input image is not a portrait. So let's just keep it like that, and let's just press generate, click on generate, and let's hopefully have the image decoded at the end so that we can actually get this final image that we want. So here already you can see that this kind of covering of the face is much better, I would say, for what I had in mind when I typed the prompt out. Which again, and now it actually decodes, so this is amazing. So now it did actually 46 steps, so we might increase the steps here to kind of make up for it. But as you might be able to imagine, since we are starting from an all-white background, it would be much easier to get to like a fully veiled person, because it also takes the whiteness from this input image and tries to convert it into the whiteness of the linen with your headscarf. I might try this with veil again, because before headscarf worked better for like covering the face too compared to veil, and veil might kind of mess it up again. That's kind of the learning process you will get by doing like a specific style. You will kind of figure what works better. But here, okay, this is a great example because despite us using veil, it kind of covers the whole face because it has more of this, like, let's say whitish background information to use to actually cover the face. So here it's slightly messed up, you know, the eyes are kind of strange. I would probably increase the steps here to 80 and kind of try this again. And again, like right now we are just like generating the same kind of images again with the same settings, just a random seed. So I think this already works much better. Okay, so here we can see the kind of face mask, which I figured is kind of a thing because there's a lot of like face masks in the dataset usually, so I don't really want that, but like now we can start like improving our prompt and improving the kind of image we want to get. So I will take a very short leave, but I will just put this to, let's say, 8 images, and I will just generate those 8 images in the background so you can see that while I take a short break and we just have this generating in the background, and I will see you back in a minute. 1 second. So this generates, and I will turn this off just for a moment. Okay, so I'll see you in a minute, hopefully. I think that was very loud right now. I hope I didn't break your ears if you were using headphones, but I'm sorry. So anyway, I hope you get the point here, okay? Some images are better than others, and let's just go through them quickly. So this one kind of is, oops, and I have to turn the sound off. So anyway, so here we can kind of see like this is something I kind of prefer where the face is actually hidden. So maybe we want to get closer to that, kind of improve our prompt. This one too I like kind of for what I was imagining. This one is nice as well. This one is terrible, honestly, for what I was expecting. And this one, those are quite nice. There's like the kind of face mask situation again that we had before. But okay, so now we work with like a 0.75 as like the input value. So if we put this down to like say 0.65, I will just, and I will not create 8 again, but let's do like one at a time. But now we are using only 65% of random noise, but 35% of the noise that we put in. So here I think what we will see more and more is that, for example, here the face will be even more covered simply by the fact that our input image or like our reference grain, let's say our input grain, is much more white. So it just gets the white linen much more than compared to what we had before. Here again we can see that the white is much more dominant in a sense. So we have a lot of things open now. Let's just use another image, I would say. Let's use another input image just to see what kind of stuff we can do. So one thing I like to do is searching for masks, which again for this kind of let's say topic of creating portraits or like this general subject matter can be quite interesting. So I have one in mind that we used before in Heibara Ai in our Instagram project, or not Instagram project, but our project that's also on Instagram. I cannot really see the mask here. I know, and I think I found it like this before, Japanese mask, I think, giving me the opportunity to advertise Instagram, but it doesn't work. Never mind. I didn't say that. So this mask I used before. Oh, these masks are also very nice illustrations. But anyway, let's go with this mask for the moment. And I hope it's, yes, this should also be open, public domain, I mean, and we can download it and just save it again. And this, for example, let's get back here to Stable Diffusion. And this image obviously doesn't provide us with like this kind of whitish grain for the mask, but instead obviously something red, and also these kind of horns. And depending on how low we put this, so let's just try this now. I might put this down as well, the CFG scale. I kind of want to give it a bit more creativity. With that we can kind of see what happens now, like how the mask is interpreted. So here I can already see, okay, this is too much mask, too much reference image, and too little creativity, because it kind of keeps this kind of strange, or like it's not a strange shape here. It kind of makes sense in the mask, but it kind of makes it kind of look weird in that in the output image. So maybe let's go with 0.75 again. And this is the kind of process you will inevitably go through if you decide to use this same method, where you are basically just like playing around and like trying what works, what doesn't work. So here, for example, okay, it interpreted the mask as an actual face, so that's not really what I wanted either. So maybe something in between. And this way, like you get to where you want to be step by step, and eventually get to the image where you want to be. And like, let's put it like this, like nobody really knows from the beginning where they will land, like kind of from the image. So that's that. I will try to, can I run this thing in the background? Okay, I think, yeah, this kind of works now. Okay, so follow on Instagram. I hope this works. It doesn't only show on my PC now. Okay, let's, this is also not really it. Let's say 6.8. Perhaps we also have to go higher with the CFG scale to kind of get back the linen situation. Probably so. Let's just try that. So we increase, yeah, now okay, the CFG scale kind of like forces the linen to be there, but the denoising strength is too low for that kind of CFG scale, I assume. So that's that, and we can play around with it. So right now, I'm not really happy with this either, but I was able to get like good results with this in the past. You just kind of have to like ease your way there. So perhaps we can go even a bit higher with the denoising strength. This kind of looks fun already though. So maybe if I cut the white in the linen, it will kind of have more freedom to kind of interpret the face differently. So that might be a way to improve this as well. So let's see, maybe we get our error we had before again. Kind of looks like it. So maybe that's a good moment to restart again. So I'll just do that. Or maybe let's wait another few seconds. But to get back to the topic of finding our reference images, if you check the video description already, you will have seen that for one, I personally recommend Museo. Oh, and it actually rendered, it actually finished. That's nice. So I'll just have another generation rendering in the background while I talk with you about other references. Okay, we are really in this in-between space. We kind of have to fine-tune this a little bit. So anyway, Museo is a great resource, I personally think, and it kind of connects this AI generation to like the history, the art history. And I see people are joining. That's really nice. Thank you for your feedback about the Three.js tutorial. I see like this is a very different topic in some sense, but if you're working creatively, I think this will be interesting for you as well. So I hope you find this interesting just the same. And thank you for your comment and feedback. So getting back to the topic, I think this is a really interesting way of like kind of connecting the history of art with this like new generation of art. But another way to do this, if like there are specific types of images you can't find here, for example, you won't find much photography with Museo because they are usually not public domain. But for that you can use Unsplash. So Unsplash is kind of like, okay, let's put it like this. It's basically like a stock photo library, but for free and free to use without crediting the creator of the image. So that is kind of a good starting point, usually if we want to have something more photography based. So let's assume we want to create a landscape. So I'll just put in there landscape, use landscape as a reference image, or maybe even yeah, and maybe let's do landscape. Or here we could also do like something abstract, perhaps. Yeah, we could use some kind of colors and shapes in order to kind of guide our generation. So I think this one is kind of interesting for that purpose. So maybe let's just try that for the moment. This might be strange and it might get to a place where we don't want to be, but let's just try for the purpose of this. So now I kind of want to kind of specify the prompt just a little bit to really kind of focus on this specific reference image. So enigmatic figure shrouded in mystery, face completely covered by seamless, pristine linen vial, smooth unbroken folds. Let's try heavy folds instead. Heavy linen folds wrapping around, let's say, entire face perhaps, creating an impenetrable mask of whiteness. Well, that really doesn't fit what we are trying to get anymore. So let's kind of cut that and think of what we could do. So this one's kind of cool because it has this like glowiness. So I kind of want something that is like mask illuminated from inside with warm glow. Maybe something like this, set against the clean neutral studio backdrop, even lighting, low contrast, airless stillness. Perhaps that all still works. So let's just try. Let's just see where this goes. So this is the kind of a moment where, like, okay, I can see in my output images, I don't really get where I want to be. And this is not what I want to have either. But, you know, like you slowly start to kind of get into this dialogue with the algorithm, with the model, with the AI of what you want to have and what you don't want to have. So here in the negative prompt, just to explain that for a moment, because I didn't really pay much attention to that just yet. With the negative prompt, you can kind of say what you don't want to have in it, obviously, as the name suggests. But in technical terms, we are always generating two images. As I said before, we have this like random noise at the start point, and we take these steps, in this case 80 steps or 58 steps, where we are taking noise away. So the negative prompt does basically the same thing at the same time right next to the positive prompt. So the negative prompt also creates an image with the terms that we put in there, and it kind of subtracts the output from the negative prompt for each denoising step of the positive prompt. I hope this kind of makes sense. I think I'm not explaining it very clearly, but just imagine you are creating like the image you want, and then you create the image you don't want, and for every step you subtract the image that you don't want from the image that you want. So this way you can get closer and more precisely to the output image by creating basically the negative of that. Yes, I hope that kind of makes sense. But I mean, intuitively we'll understand negative prompt means that you kind of create what you don't want to have, or like subtract what you don't want to have. So in this case, I kind of might say face, because I get a lot of faces still, and I don't really want that. So maybe I put face in there. This kind of might create strange faces instead of like creating not a face, but let's just try. Is there anything else we can improve in this prompt in order to kind of get to where we want? Face fully covered perhaps is something that we might add. And maybe instead of mask illuminated, we do linen illuminated from inside with warm glow. Let's just try that, and let's see if we can get somewhere with that input. Hopefully so, but let's see. Okay, so we still have the face there. That's not really what we want. And this is not really getting closer to it either. Let's say portrait as a negative prompt as well, and let's kind of see if that does anything with it. This again might kind of destroy it completely, because if it tries to do the opposite of a portrait, it kind of makes something strange. But let's see if this does do anything. Well, now it kind of looks like an illustration. It still does look interesting, but not really where I want to go. Okay, so this might be a moment where we start to add braces. So I kind of want to focus on this face fully covered aspect of it. Maybe also let's add face fully veiled, because we are speaking of a veil beforehand, and let's see if that does anything what we want, and it really doesn't do that. Okay, perhaps, and that might be an issue as well. that the input image is kind of close to this kind of specific skin color here, so we can't get this whiteness of the linen through it much better. What I do like of those images, those like here, this is really nice. I just don't like that there's still a face. So this is really quite neat, I believe, this kind of glow inside of the linen. So maybe let's just try faceless as a prompt, enigmatic faceless figure. Maybe that helps a little bit. Let's see. But as you can see, you know, like, we just go there step by step, and here really doesn't work that well either. Now it just makes like a strange face rather than no face. So not really happy with that, and that might be due to the input image. But let me show you something different now. Something very quite different indeed, in fact. So let's go back to the landscape thing. I just want to show you that this works with different styles as well. So for one, let's get like an image of a landscape. Maybe let's try this landscape. I just download that. But before doing the landscape, maybe we go back one step more and kind of stay with this. Or maybe okay, let's take this step by step. For one, okay, I keep everything I have here for the moment. But just use a different model. Okay, so let's go back to this image, which I kind of liked the results from. And instead of using our Chroma XR model, we can use this Anima pencil version 4, which is this anime model. So now we basically just go away from this kind of photographic style and instead of having this photographic style, we go to this anime style. And thank you for your feedback in the chat, by the way. So if you don't want to create photorealism, basically, you can get to this. So let's kind of go through this and think of what we have to add in order to kind of get out the specific anime style. So I just start with anime style, basically. Anime style, and I might also add the information of like retro anime. That's something I personally like, something in the style of like Akira, I guess. Again, please pardon my Japanese pronunciation. And maybe that's already it. So let's just try that and kind of see where this goes with a different model. So again, the settings are quite similar. We are basically keeping everything here as it is. And now we get, instead of this photorealistic style, we get this anime style. So I think this already looks pretty cool, to be honest. I mean, again, this isn't really like the Heibara Ai style that I am usually looking for, but if you're interested in that, you can kind of start to search for the type of model that you want. And honestly, I really like that. I really like that already. Maybe we want to give it a bit more creativity, perhaps, and so maybe we can put the denoising strength higher, and maybe let's put the CFG scale to 6. Maybe that's something. Let's try this again and see where this takes us. Okay, that's interesting. Not really what I had in mind, but interesting nonetheless. So I think this is also something you kind of start to figure when you're working with Stable Diffusion, that you kind of have to be open-minded just for what you get out of it. Me personally, like in the beginning I was kind of frustrated by the fact of like things don't really look like I want them to look like, but you kind of start to figure with more generations and more stuff you do, that in fact it's kind of like, okay, you're kind of trying to find a middle ground with the AI. Like you have your ideas, the AI the model has its training data, so you kind of try to figure out how to kind of get out of it what you both can do practically, like what you can imagine and what the model can produce. So I like those quite a bit, honestly. So with that, now we had this kind of like creative kind of style. We don't really take the composition of our input image, but we can also do that. So as I showed you before, I downloaded the landscape model, or not landscape model, but landscape image as a reference image. So now I think this is the moment where I go back to the prompt maker. So I do prompt maker.bat. That's like the file that I personally just created to start Ollama and start the prompt maker. So now it will basically boot Ollama and will start the prompt maker. But you can do it just by the same method I showed you before. So here I can say something like create a prompt of an anime style landscape with lush green grass and mountains, dreamy, or like, let's say, fluffy clouds, and a boy standing in the distance, holding a hat in his hand, and his clothes moving in the windy landscape. That's the nice thing, you know, like if I put this in just as a prompt, it would be terrible. So if I just put it in here and like kind of let it create it like that, it would be much nicer. Okay, this looks nice already, but I want to have it in low contrast and low saturation and in a retro anime style. Yeah, let's try that. So this way we can kind of start to improve it, because I already read vivid colors here. Expressive lines, that's all not really the kind of thing I wanted. So let's try vintage inspired landscape. Muted colors palette, soft focus, gentle gradient effect, not sure about that. Low contrast, desaturated hues, rolling hills, distant mountains, lush green grass swaying gently in the breeze, fluffy white clouds drifting lazily across a faded blue sky. A young boy stands alone, casual attire blown by strong gusts, his hat clutched in hand, carefree spirits, nostalgia, retro anime aesthetic, reminiscent of 80s, 90s Japanese animation, warm nostalgic tones, dreamy atmosphere. That sounds very nice and sounds like something I would definitely not have come up with myself. So here again we can do the format prompt thing, and now we get this kind of situation here where it kind of gets rid of the line breaks. I already kind of know I'm not gonna talk more with Ollama or the model here, so I'm just gonna quit it and also quit Ollama here, so that the next generation is not too slow. And here again, you know, let's start with 0.75, because that's one thing to consider generally. For one, here's like a bit of darkness in the sky, which I don't want to have in my final image. And the other thing is like there's no person in here. So when it will create a new image, it definitely needs enough random noise to be able to create the person into this, because it's not in the reference image. So let's just try that and let's just see where this goes, where this takes us. And hopefully this renders nicely and works. Oh, and this starts very nicely. The one thing I can already see, okay, it doesn't, the person doesn't hold, the boy in this case doesn't hold the hat in his hand. And there's quite a lot of creativity, let's say, in there. Like the landscape is not really rendered closely to the input image. And it is a bit too... it's a bit too basic, I guess. and perhaps it's the 80s and 90s Japanese animation style. I think especially in the 80s, this might fit in more, like better, but it's not really detailed. So maybe I might just make the aspect of detailed explicit in here. So maybe let's say detailed retro anime style, and maybe reminiscent of detailed 80s 90s Japanese animation. Maybe that works. And I think I can also go a bit down in the denoising strength. So let's try 0.7 so we can kind of see more closely these lines of the mountains if we want them, just for example. So let's try that. Let's see where this takes us. And if you have any questions, just as before, please feel free. Please feel free to let me know in the chat, so I can already see people asking for doing the same kind of situation with Xavier Chroma, which we can definitely do. Okay, here's a bit more. We definitely get a little bit more detail here, but it's still not so great. Maybe I'm taking this part away. And maybe let's put this detail thing in the beginning to give it a bit more importance. And let's try this again. Maybe there's also a correlation of like, if I say low saturation or low contrast and desaturated hues, that this overlaps with like less detail perhaps. So this is kind of a thing we might have to consider. Okay, I will definitely mispronounce your name, but to Sudepto Bose, maybe that's your name. I'm sorry, please correct me if that's not it. If this is all new to you, I definitely understand. Like, there's a lot going on, and it might be complicated just to get started and kind of wrap your head around it. And I can definitely see that it's like difficult to follow in general, and I spend quite a lot of time on it. I mean, this is my job, so to say, at the moment. So yeah, but I think you can like get started relatively easy, especially with like something like this, where I can hopefully give you a bit of background knowledge or insight into like all the things that I messed up in the beginning, because I certainly didn't start like doing great images from the beginning. So maybe you can learn from all the mistakes I made. And I mean, like, what is a mistake in this situation anyway? You know, like it's more of a playful thing. So now I put the denoising strength even a bit lower, so now we can kind of get this mountain line here, but I'm not super happy with this. I definitely had better results with this before, but here we can also do the same thing we did before, which might be interesting to you now. As before I showed you the veiling, I showed you how to cover the face and kind of like using this kind of like, let's say, whitish noise to basically create this white linen. But in fact, we can also use this for landscape, for example. Like, we don't have a lot of white in this landscape, but if we want to have something that, for example, here, where we want to kind of focus on the clouds, or perhaps focus on some kind of mistiness or fog, this can help a lot, in fact. So let's put the denoising strength a bit higher again, at 0.75, just to give it enough creativity or enough freedom to kind of interpret this into a landscape. But let's just try this again, and let's kind of see what kind of detailed retro anime aesthetic we can get from here. And you know, like, personally, I find this very interesting now. Like, okay, like, gets this kind of sketchy look, like not being sketchy, but like sketch-like look out of this, which I find very interesting, honestly. And here again, maybe it's a bit too little greenish, so maybe I go even up to 0.8 denoising strength to kind of get more of the landscape from it and less of the sketch style from it. But yeah, this is kind of how we can ease towards that. So this one, okay, now we can see, okay, the green is coming through slowly. So maybe we might even go up to 0.85 here and kind of get to somewhere where we have like some sort of balance between the whiteness of the input image and some kind of landscape-like output. Now this starts getting interesting, honestly. And again, here we are not really guiding the composition anymore. We're just kind of giving it quite some freedom. In this case, maybe let's get the anime, the retro way too. Let's kind of see what happens if we take the retro way, if we can get a little bit more, detail that way. Let's see. So next we can go back to the other models again. I read that in the chat of like maybe not using anime models for this kind of use case, although I hope you can now see that you can use the same technique for like different styles and different models. But perhaps we can use the same kind of technique also with a different model. So let's try that, and that's something I didn't even try myself so far. So let's go to Chroma XL again. We can also go to Juggernaut just for a moment and kind of test it with the hypermodels and kind of go down with the steps, kind of see where that takes us. But now, like for me, personally speaking, I'm in kind of like explorative territory again. So I didn't really try any of that. Okay, I can see, okay, I forgot to put the detailed anime aesthetic away. I mean, honestly, this looks kind of nice as well. So, landscape photograph. I mean, we can keep the boy there, I guess. That might look a bit more strange, being photorealistic. Something I would add here is also like 35mm, which is usually a good keyword, because if you think about how these models are trained, they're basically scraping the internet, as I said before, trying to get all the images from the internet and understanding based on their alt texts, so based on their descriptions, what they contain. So 35mm usually refers to images shot on 35mm film. So these are usually film photos. So I can also put film photo here. So of course we're kind of narrowing the range of reference images by saying, okay, kind of focus in your trained data set, or the inside of the data set that the model is trained on, please focus on those images that have originally been tagged as like 35mm and film photo. So that's something we can try to kind of get more to a kind of photographic style, a specific photographic style. One thing we will also see if we put in 35mm is, for example, that I think in my experience, film photos are usually associated with 50mm lenses. So there's like a specific kind of, let's say, crop that we get with these kind of images. Let me kind of catch up with the chat. Okay, that's kind of interesting as well. And a very important point I'm reading in the chat. So we can also use the images that we generated. Like we can use the images that we generate here as a new input here. So that's kind of a thing, like we've been in a very, as I said before, like exploration phase of generating. Like we're kind of trying to get out of this, like a sense of where we can go. Once we are at the point where we kind of get to like very close to an image that we want to have, but we are like not very happy with specific aspects of it, we can start to use those images as the new input images for our next generation. So this is what I will do in just a moment. Let me just check in the background our images that we generated. So now this image, for example, I really like quite a lot. But let's say I don't like the anime style, but I kind of like the feel, I kind of like the colors and the composition of it. So now I can use it as an input image, not with the anime model, but perhaps with the Savichrome XR model. So one thing you can do that I might teach you here as well, if you have your image that you generated and drag and drop it into the prompt area, this will give you all the settings that you use to create that specific image. So this way I was able to recover basically my prompt that I used for this image that I have showed you here, like for this image that you can see in the preview. So this is what I will do next, and let me check the denoising strength. So here, I mean, obviously want to stay kind of close to it if I want to do a version of this that is more photorealistic. So let's just try that, and maybe I go down to 6 with the CFG scale, give it a bit more creativity, and just press generate, and let's see where this takes us now. But okay, so now we kind of start to go into this reiterative process of like kind of, okay, we created our own images and now we use our own images as reference images. So this one, for example, I like quite a lot. Although I don't really like that there's still this kind of face in there, so I might put face there again. I kind of want to focus again more on the face being fully covered, as it is here as well. So let's go into the prompt again, and let's check that enigmatic figure. So one thing I think with Heibara Ai that we figured is that mysterious figure kind of often makes it easier to get the face veiled, which is interesting, like you start to kind of understand the prompts better. So we do that, face completely covered by white detailed white linen veil, and let's do the heavy folds again. Heavy folds wrapping around entire face, and this one I didn't really like, but set against clean studio backdrop works well again, I believe. So let's try that. Let's see where this takes us. Okay, this is interesting. This is, I guess, better in some sense already. We do get the face covered, at least to the eyes. It's really difficult to get the eyes away for some reason. And it might actually be easier to get it away by putting the denoising strength even lower here, but now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not sure how much photorealism we can get in here by putting the denoising strength lower, and maybe I put the CFG scale up a bit again. Let's just try that for a moment and see where this takes us. But yes, I think this is also a good illustration, a good example, where we might have gotten like one step closer now, like just a tiny bit closer we are, I believe. And now we can use this again, you know, like we went from this like random anime image, let's say, to this more photorealistic image. And now we can use this more photorealistic image by just dragging and dropping it in here and kind of start like being even more reiterative, like kind of creating variations of this. This is also something that you might know from Midjourney and Co, where they allow you to create variations, which I assume practically does something very similar to this. Yes, so here maybe I'm giving it a bit more freedom again, going to 0.7 and kind of like, I guess, going through the motions here, like kind of seeing where this takes us, like what kind of aspects we can change in order to get to the point where we want to be. Okay, here now, okay, it starts to create the face again, which might be not what we want here. Another thing, okay, so now that's kind of interesting as well, like this would be kind of like a thing I might consider. I don't really like that the person looks very angry, so since I'm not making explicit what kind of facial expression this person has, I might put in here like calm face or relaxed face, something like that, to kind of focus on that aspect. But I think we're kind of like, things are repeating to a degree. Just a few more things I showed you before. There might be something you want to use. If we put this back here again, and let's say I don't really like the face here and the face is broken or whatever, or maybe do we have an image of a face that kind of looks messed up? I don't know. But one of the extensions I showed you in the very beginning is ADetailer. So ADetailer is basically just a way to fix faces. So I can basically in most cases just say enable ADetailer. You have to have the extension installed to do that, but assuming you have that, you just have to press ADetailer. And let's assume we kind of want to have something very similar to this, but with a fixed face. So I can go lower here to like, let's say 0.5, where it will be very close to the input image. But by turning on ADetailer, it will kind of create a new face on top of this face. I'll just do that just for illustrational purposes so that you have seen it once. And I hope that kind of gives you like a sense on how to use it. Sometimes it can be that this makes the whole process quite slow. But let's see. Now we should see, right? Now we should see that ADetailer is finding a face. So it kind of detects the face and now generates a new image on top of the face. So in this case, that was kind of stupid of me. If we want to use a specific prompt for that, we can also put it in here. So I can put in calm face, for example. Calm face, relaxed expression, and then negative prompt, angry, stressed. I'm not really sure what this is, what is happening here. Something like that. So now I could do that again and kind of try to fix the face in a sense where I'm kind of changing the expression of the face. And I think with that we are relatively close to wrapping up. If you have any last questions, anything you want to see, or that kind of a burning question you have, please go into the chat. Let me know if there's something else you want me to talk about. But if there is nothing left in particular that you're looking for, I will most likely send you to our blog, this one here, the blog at blog.heibara.ai. So on this website you will find written tutorials, and here you will also see basically the first half of our tutorial or of this live stream where we installed Stability Matrix. So here you can kind of check the process again and do that after the fact if you prefer that in written form. And we also have different tutorials here for how to upscale and how to create videos. But let's say here, well, the face is still pretty angry. Maybe just a little less angry. We can kind of here in the in painting kind of increase the denoising strength to give it a bit more freedom to kind of change the face after the fact. So I'll just do that while I'm waiting if someone else is while you have the time to write in the chat if there's something else. And too much samples, I see. But yes, that's kind of the process that I wanted to show you today. And if you have other questions, we can do this again at a later point. Please check out the Discord, and this works much better. So we're getting rid of the angriness. That's very nice. That's kind of what I wanted. But remember, you can go to the Discord, you can ask questions there as well, and I'm pretty sure I will do such a live stream again in the future. So if you have anything that you can't ask right now, or that's perhaps too much to go through right now, just let me know in the Discord and I will consider it for the next stream. And again, as before, remember to subscribe if I can get this Yes, if I can get this running. Remember to subscribe to the channel. This will kind of evolve here. We might talk more about AI in the future, and if this was like very new to you, yeah, I'm sure you will learn more in future videos. Perhaps there will be more 3JS tutorials in the future, or creative coding tutorials. I don't rule that out at all. And if you want to stay up to date in terms of other stuff, my personal work, make sure to check out Instagram, because I always announce the live streams there as well. And if that's it, thank you for participating in the chat. I hope you learned something and this was interesting to you. And with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I will see you in the next stream. Goodbye.